In 2009, a night security guard named Daniel accepted a temporary job at a government office building scheduled for permanent closure. The building was located on the outskirts of the city, far from residential areas, and had been mostly abandoned for years. His job was simple: stay inside from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., monitor the cameras, and make one patrol per hour through the main floors. No visitors, no employees, no activity. On his first night, everything felt normal. The building was old but intact. Rows of desks covered in dust, inactive computers, empty offices frozen in time. The lights worked only in certain sections, forcing Daniel to rely on his flashlight during patrols. The silence was constant, broken only by the hum of distant electrical systems still running somewhere in the structure. Around 1:40 a.m., Daniel noticed something unusual on one of the security monitors. A camera covering the third-floor administrative area showed movement. At first, he assumed it was a technical glitch. The image flickered slightly, and for a moment, a shadow crossed the hallway. He leaned closer to the screen, expecting the feed to stabilize. It didn't. The shadow appeared again, this time slower, taller than a person should have looked in that corridor. Daniel checked the camera ID and confirmed the location. The third floor had been sealed months earlier. No access cards were active for that level. Still, assuming it might be an animal or faulty sensor, he logged the anomaly and continued watching. At 2 a.m., during his scheduled patrol, Daniel decided to check the third floor in person. He took the elevator up, noticing something strange immediately. The elevator stopped briefly between floors before continuing, something that hadn't happened earlier. When the doors opened on the third floor, the temperature felt noticeably colder. The hallway lights were off. Only emergency exit signs cast a dim red glow. As Daniel walked forward, his footsteps echoed unnaturally loud, as if the building itself was amplifying the sound. Halfway down the corridor, he noticed one office door slightly open. That door had been closed earlier, according to his patrol log. He pushed it open slowly. Inside, the room was empty. No furniture, no equipment, just dust on the floor. But in the center of the room, there were fresh footprints, bare footprints. They led from the doorway to the far wall and stopped abruptly, as if whoever made them had simply vanished. Daniel took photos with his phone and radioed the control center. There was no response. His radio emitted only static. Assuming interference, he returned to the security room. When he reviewed the camera footage from the third floor, his stomach dropped. The camera had captured him entering the hallway, but behind him at the end of the corridor, something else had been standing there, tall, motionless, its shape distorted by the low light, but unmistakably humanoid. Daniel did not see it at the time. From that moment on, the activity escalated. Doors began opening on their own, motion sensors triggered in empty rooms. At 3:17 a.m., the intercom system activated by itself. A low sound came through the speakers, resembling breathing, slow, rhythmic, too close. Daniel locked himself in the security room and watched the monitors continuously. On several cameras, the same figure appeared, always standing just outside the field of view, partially obscured. It never walked. It never ran. It only appeared closer each time. At 4:05 a.m., the figure appeared directly outside the security room door. The camera facing the hallway showed its silhouette inches from the door, head tilted unnaturally to one side. The lights above flickered violently. The door handle began to move. Daniel later stated that the most terrifying part was not the image, but the sound. A faint knocking, 3 slow taps, repeated over and over. When morning staff arrived at 6 a.m., they found Daniel sitting on the floor, back against the wall, unresponsive. He was taken to a hospital and placed under observation. He never returned to the building. The official investigation concluded that the incident was caused by exhaustion and stress. However, When technicians reviewed the archived security footage, they found something they could not explain. The cameras clearly showed a tall figure present on multiple floors throughout the night, appearing and disappearing without triggering motion sensors. 2 weeks later, the building was demolished ahead of schedule. Daniel has never spoken publicly about what he saw that night, but according to medical reports, he still wakes up at exactly 3:17 a.m. every night, claiming he can hear someone breathing just outside his bedroom door. In 2014, a small family-owned hotel in Northern Oregon began receiving complaints that didn't make sense. Guests were reporting noises coming from rooms that were officially closed. The hotel had 3 floors, but the entire 3rd floor had been shut down for renovation after water damage years earlier. No staff was allowed up there, the doors were locked, the electricity was cut. And yet, multiple guests insisted they heard footsteps directly above them during the night. At first, management assumed the complaints were exaggerated. Old buildings make noise, pipes shift, wood expands. But when the same reports came from different guests, staying in different rooms, the concern grew. The sounds were always described the same way. Slow footsteps, a pause, then dragging, as if something heavy was being pulled across the floor. One night, a couple staying in room 214 reported something more disturbing. Around 2:30 a.m., they heard what sounded like furniture being moved above them. Moments later, something fell, hard. The ceiling light flickered, and for a few seconds the room went completely dark. When the power returned, the couple noticed muddy water dripping from a crack in the ceiling. The hotel manager inspected the area the next morning. There was no damage on the 3rd floor, no furniture, no water source. Concerned about liability, the owner asked a maintenance worker named Eric to inspect the 3rd floor after hours. Eric had worked at the hotel for years and knew the building well. He brought a flashlight, a camera, and a radio. At 11:45 p.m., he unlocked the stairwell door and climbed up. The 3rd floor was colder than the rest of the building. Dust covered the carpet untouched for years. Old room numbers were still attached to the doors, but many of them were crooked, as if they had been pulled loose and placed back incorrectly. Halfway down the hallway, Eric noticed something immediately wrong. The dust on the floor wasn't uniform. There were clear disturbances, footprints, not fresh, but not old enough to be years old either. As he walked further, his radio crackled with static. Then a voice came through. It sounded like the front desk clerk asking if everything was okay. Eric responded, but the radio went silent. Assuming interference, he continued. He reached room 317. The door was unlocked. Eric later stated that this was the moment he considered turning back. No one should have been able to unlock that door. Still, doing his job, he pushed it open. Inside, the room was completely empty. No bed, no furniture, but the carpet was soaked as if it had been submerged in water and left to dry. The smell was overwhelming, damp, rotting, like a flooded basement. As Eric stood there, his flashlight began to flicker. That's when he heard it. Not footsteps, breathing. Slow, uneven breathing coming from the bathroom. He called out, expecting maybe a squatter or an animal. There was no response. He stepped closer and pushed the bathroom door open. The bathtub was full, not with water, with dark, murky liquid that moved unnaturally, as if something beneath the surface was shifting. Before Eric could react, the bathroom mirror fogged up instantly. Words began to appear as if written from the inside. "Don't look up!" Eric froze. He felt a presence behind him, something close enough that he could feel the air. Slowly, against every instinct he had, he raised his eyes toward the ceiling. The ceiling bulged downward, a shape pressed against it from above, distorting the surface like stretched skin. A face formed briefly, mouth open, eyes wide. Then the ceiling snapped back into place. The lights went out. When emergency services arrived later that night, they found Eric unconscious in the hallway. He survived, but he refused to describe what he saw after that moment. He quit his job the next day, Following the incident, the hotel permanently sealed the third floor. Not renovated, not repaired. Sealed. Guests were told it was unsafe due to structural damage, but the complaints never fully stopped. Even now, guests staying on the second floor report hearing water dripping from the ceiling around 2:30 a.m. And sometimes, when they check the stain above their beds, they find something scratched faintly into the surface. 4 words: "Don't look up." In 2017, a small commuter train line outside Chicago quietly shut down one of its oldest stations, officially due to low usage and structural concerns. The station had been built in the 1950s and sat underground, hidden from the street, accessible only through a narrow stairwell behind an abandoned warehouse. There were no signs or maps. If you didn't already know it existed, you would never find it. For years, late-night commuters reported strange experiences there. Trains arriving too early, too late, or appearing with no record on the schedule. Most complaints were ignored until the station was marked for permanent closure. In March, a transit employee named Laura was assigned to inspect the station one final time before it was sealed. Her job was simple: document the platform, check remaining equipment, and lock the access points. She arrived at 11:10 p.m., long after the last scheduled train. The platform lights were still on, casting a weak yellow glow over the tiled walls. Almost immediately, Laura noticed something wrong. The electronic arrival board was active, even though power to the system had supposedly been cut days earlier. The screen displayed a single message: "Train approaching." No time was listed. Assuming it was a malfunction, Laura took photos and continued walking. Her footsteps echoed unnaturally, stretching deep into the tunnels. As she reached the edge of the platform, she heard the sound of a train, but it wasn't coming from either tunnel. The vibration seemed to rise from beneath the platform itself, metal scraping against metal. The arrival board flickered and updated. "Train arriving." The lights dimmed suddenly. When they flickered back on, Laura realized she was no longer alone. On the opposite side of the platform, several people were standing silently. They hadn't been there moments before. None of them spoke or moved. Their clothing looked outdated, styles from different decades, worn and dirty. Laura called out, identifying herself as staff, but no one responded. The arrival board changed again. "Do not board." A strong gust of wind rushed through the station. Headlights appeared at the far end of the tunnel, dim and unstable. A train slowly emerged, its exterior rusted and unmarked, its windows dark and opaque. It stopped with a piercing screech, and the doors opened. The people across the platform began walking toward it. As they passed under the lights, Laura noticed their faces were blank, their eyes unfocused. Some looked injured, others looked soaked, as if they had been underwater. One man briefly turned his head toward her. He was wearing an old transit uniform with a name badge that read H. Miller. Laura recognized the name immediately. Henry Miller was a train operator who had disappeared during a late shift in 1982. His body was never found. The arrival board flashed violently. "Final stop." Panic took over and Laura ran. She doesn't remember reaching the stairwell, only the sound of the train doors slamming shut behind her. The moment she reached the surface, the sound stopped completely. The next morning, Laura filed a report. It was dismissed as stress-related hallucination, and the station was sealed that same day. However, security footage from nearby tunnels showed a train entering the closed station at 11:32 p.m. There was no record of it leaving. Once a year, on the same date Laura entered the station, signal operators report a single message briefly appearing on their screens: "Train approaching," with no destination listed. In 2012, a small rural hospital in southern England closed one of its oldest wings after repeated reports of electrical failures and structural instability. The wing had been built in the early 1900s and was no longer used for patients, but parts of it remained accessible to staff for storage and maintenance. Most employees avoided the area whenever possible, not because it was unsafe, but because of what people claimed to hear there after midnight. For years, night nurses reported footsteps in empty corridors, doors opening and closing on their own, and call buttons activating in rooms that no longer existed on the hospital's digital floor plan. Management dismissed the stories as stress and exhaustion. That changed after a night security officer named Thomas documented something he couldn't explain. Thomas had worked hospital security for over a decade and was known for being calm and methodical. On a winter night shift, shortly after 1 a.m., he was monitoring the camera feeds when he noticed movement in the abandoned wing. A corridor camera showed a light turning on by itself at the far end of the hallway. That shouldn't have been possible. Power to that section was limited, and motion sensors had been disabled years earlier. Thomas assumed it was a wiring issue and decided to investigate. He grabbed his flashlight and walked toward the wing. As he crossed the threshold, the atmosphere changed immediately. The air felt colder and heavier, and the distant hum of the hospital faded, replaced by an unnatural silence. His radio began to crackle, though no one was speaking on the channel. Halfway down the corridor, Thomas heard a sound that made him stop. It was the soft squeak of shoes against linoleum. Slow, careful, coming from ahead. He called out, announcing himself, but there was no response. The sound continued, stopping whenever he stopped, resuming only when he took another step forward. He reached a patient room that still had its door intact. The light inside was on. Thomas knew that room well. It had once belonged to an elderly patient who had passed away unexpectedly during the night years earlier, despite being listed as stable hours before. Multiple nurses had requested reassignment after that incident. Thomas pushed the door open. The room was empty, no bed, no equipment. Only a single chair positioned beside where the bed would have been. As he stepped inside, the light flickered, and the call button panel on the wall activated by itself. A low tone echoed through the room, signaling a request for assistance. Then a voice came through the intercom. It was weak and distorted, but clear enough to understand. "Can someone help me?" Thomas froze. He checked the hallway. No one was there. The intercom repeated the request, this time sounding closer, more urgent. "Please, I can't breathe." His radio suddenly burst to life with overlapping static and fragments of voices, none of which belonged to anyone on staff. The room temperature dropped sharply. Thomas felt a presence behind him, close enough that he could feel a shift in the air. Slowly, he turned. The chair behind him was now occupied. An elderly figure sat there, its features obscured by shadow, its posture rigid. Tubes extended from its face and arms, trailing into nothing. The monitor mounted on the wall flickered on, displaying a flat line that immediately spiked into erratic movement. Thomas backed toward the door, unable to speak. The figure lifted its head slightly, and the intercom activated one last time. "Don't leave me." The lights went out. When backup security arrived minutes later, they found Thomas sitting against the corridor wall, shaking and unresponsive. He was taken off duty and later resigned. He refused to give a full statement, only saying that the wing was still in use by something that never left. Following the incident, the hospital sealed the entire wing permanently. The cameras were removed, the doors welded shut. Officially, the area no longer exists. Yet, to this day, night staff report something unsettling. Occasionally, when passing certain empty corridors, their radios activate on their own, transmitting a faint, labored breathing sound, and once in a while a call light briefly flashes on a control panel, labeled with a room number that hasn't existed for decades. What connects these stories is not the places themselves, but the moments in which something ordinary quietly crossed into something else. None of these events happened during storms, disasters, or dramatic circumstances. They occurred during routine shifts, late-night inspections, and normal procedures carried out by people who believed they understood their surroundings. That is what makes them unsettling. Nothing announced that something was wrong. There were no warnings, no clear signs, just a gradual sense that the rules everyone relied on had stopped applying. Each of these locations was meant to serve a specific purpose. A government building meant to remain empty, a hotel floor closed for safety, a transit station scheduled to disappear quietly, a hospital wing officially abandoned. In every case, the assumption was the same. Once a place is closed, it stops being used. But these stories suggest something different. They suggest that spaces don't always follow the timelines we assign to them. That activity doesn't always end just because people leave. The individuals involved were not looking for experiences. They weren't investigators, thrill seekers, or believers in the paranormal. They were doing their jobs: security guards, maintenance workers, inspectors. People trained to notice details, to remain calm, to document irregularities logically. And yet, each of them encountered something that refused to fit into a reasonable explanation. Not because it was loud or violent, but because it behaved with intention. It waited, it responded, it appeared when no one else was present. What stands out most in these accounts is the consistency, the timing, the repetition, the way certain details return again and again. Sounds without visible sources, messages appearing where they shouldn't, instructions that arrive too late or make no sense at all, warnings that feel directed, personal, almost aware of who is listening. These are not random events, they follow patterns, and patterns suggest presence. Official responses are always the same: stress, fatigue, faulty equipment, environmental factors. And while those explanations may account for parts of what happened, they never fully address everything. They don't explain how multiple systems fail in coordination. They don't explain physical evidence that appears and disappears. And they don't explain why those involved often experience long-term effects after a single encounter. Disrupted sleep, heightened anxiety, the persistent feeling of being watched in places that should feel safe. Perhaps the most disturbing possibility is not that something supernatural is occurring, but that these experiences reveal gaps in how we understand isolation, abandonment, and time. When places are emptied, they don't simply become inactive. They become uncontrolled, unobserved, and in that absence of attention, things change. Sounds become harder to trace. Movements lose context. Ordinary signals begin to feel threatening because there is no longer anyone there to explain them. These stories don't offer conclusions. They don't provide answers or closures. They simply exist as records of moments when something unexpected happened and left lasting impressions. Whether these events were caused by psychological stress, environmental factors, or something beyond current explanation, the impact on those who experienced them was real. And that impact is what matters most, because once someone has been alone in a place that responds to them, truly responds, it becomes difficult to dismiss the experience entirely. Even if logic eventually takes over, the memory remains, the uncertainty remains. The question of whether the place was ever truly empty in the first place remains unanswered. Perhaps that is why these stories linger, not because they prove anything, but because they challenge assumptions we rarely question. That abandoned places are silent, that closed doors stay closed, that systems shut down completely, and that when we are alone, we are truly alone. Sometimes the most unsettling thought is not that something is hiding in the darkness. It's the possibility that it has been there all along, waiting for the moment no one is supposed to be watching.